So we see campaigns cost a whole lot of money to operate and to run, especially if they're going to be big time campaigns. So we got to find out where exactly these candidates get all this money. So it's time for us to take a look at fundraising and how candidates can raise funds. Here we see an example of a fundraiser. Here's President Obama. He's all dolled up. He's doing a little toast to all the people in the room that he's hoping are going to give him some money. My favorite thing here, look over there to the very far left. Oh my God, it's the Terminator. How exciting. Terminator came to President Obama's fundraiser here. I hope he's got lots of cash. So where do campaign funds come from? There's quite a few different ways here. Traditionally, most of this, and this is still true, a lot of these donations, you're going to get big donations from wealthy donors. So wealthy people are one of the main sources of funding campaigns. This is why not a lot of campaigns do things that would harm wealthy people. They rely on the support of wealthy people to run their campaigns. So we have a lot of big donations coming from wealthy donors. Those are the kind of people that are going to go to a fundraiser. They're going to pay a few $1,000s to like have dinner with the candidate, and then that's one of the ways the candidate raises money. Recent campaigns have learned that it's just as easy. If you can only get $2,500 from one rich person, it's probably easier to use the internet to get $10 from 250 average people. So a lot of small donations from average donors are making a big difference in campaign funds lately. Candidates are allowed to spend unlimited amounts of their own personal money. So that's why we see a bunch of very wealthy people running for office on their own. We see that by Donald Trump, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Like, these billionaires can spend all of their own money that they want to on a campaign. There's no limit in that. So that's a big source of funding. We're going to talk about political action committees in a minute. These are groups that organize to help donate money to campaigns and have their voices heard by the various campaigns. And then another big one here is something that we're going to talk about called independent expenditures. These are from people that are technically unconnected to the political campaigns, but they spend a lot of money on the behalf of those campaigns. Let's start there with independent expenditures. These are expenditures. So when we say expenditures, we mean that they've usually spent on ads. So it's like forms of communication that advocate for one side in an election, but like they don't cooperate with or like directly work with the candidate or their political party. So this is just like, if you are a fan of one of the candidates running for office and you like don't work with their campaign, you're not giving them money directly and you're not like taking their directions, you just want to like spend to put up a big billboard that says like vote for Kanye West or something like that. You're allowed to do that. That's your freedom of speech. That would be an independent expenditure since you're not working directly with the campaign. Any spending that's not directly coordinating with campaign officials is considered to be independent expenditures. It even can like expressly advocate for like electing a candidate or defeating a candidate. Like, you can even say, you can put up a big sign that says vote for Joe Biden, and as long as you don't work for Joe Biden, that's considered an independent expenditure. So this is like the fastest growing part of campaigns here, and this is where very, very wealthy people are able to have tremendous amounts of influence over the outcome of political campaigns. All right, let's get confusing for a minute. Let's talk about political action committees and super PACs. These are both ways of raising money. A political action committee, these have been around for a long time. These have been around since the 1970s, and this allows a business or a group of people, like an interest group, to give money to a candidate. Like, in general, we don't let businesses give money directly to candidates. We don't let organizations give money directly to candidates, but they can form what's called a political action committee. This way, their money is kept separate so that the government can like track where their money comes from. We can see where their money is spent, and anybody can look this information up so that like we can tell where the candidates get their money or where the businesses we support are giving their money. PACs have to register with the government, and they have to tell people who gave them their money, and they have to tell people how much money they are giving to candidates. There's also a limit on the amount of money that they can give to candidates, but this is a form of donating money that allows businesses and interest groups to donate directly to a campaign, and then the campaign uses this money. The newer version of things is called a super PAC. This is a result of the Citizens United court case we're going to talk about in a minute here. But a super PAC is fully anonymous. This is a bunch of anonymous people spending their own money however they want to help a candidate. They're not working with the candidate, but they're doing things that help them. When you see a commercial that's like about Hillary Clinton's emails or Barack Obama's birth certificate or Joe Biden's son or something like that, those are super PAC campaigns. Those are people spending money to advocate for the election of the candidate they like, but they're not working directly with like the Trump campaign or whoever else. These groups can spend unlimited amounts of money. This is what we call independent expenditures. And so they can do whatever they want, because otherwise we'd be limiting their freedom of speech. And so as long as they aren't working directly with a candidate, they're not like monitored by the FEC. They don't have rules to follow that the FEC can enforce. These are just groups of people spending their money to put out the message that they want to put out. And so these groups are growing and having tremendous influence on today's political campaigns. So the court case that we've talked about before and we absolutely have to know by name is called Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. This has changed campaigns and fundraising forever. This was a case in 2010 that overruled a lot of long-standing campaign donation laws. So this all starts because a group wants to show a documentary about Hillary Clinton on TV in 2008. There would be rules against this because like interest groups and organizations are not allowed to campaign for candidates within a certain amount of time before the election. And so this group sues, saying that should be their free speech right. And all they want is to be able to show their documentary on TV. And so in this case, the Supreme Court, if you remember way back the McCulloch versus Maryland decision, the Supreme Court can answer whatever question they want to. So in this case, the Supreme Court took a much bigger question than the group was asking here. So they end up overturning a bunch of limits on campaign donation and on spending in elections because they ruled that donating money and spending money is a form of freedom of speech. Since you have freedom of speech as a person, obviously groups of people should have the same freedom of speech, right? Your freedom of speech doesn't disappear because you're in a group. So by their logic, they said corporations and interest groups should have freedom of speech protections. And that means that these groups and businesses can spend unlimited amounts of money. So we can't limit the amount that businesses or groups spend independently on campaigns and elections. So that means now that wealthy groups and businesses can give unlimited amounts of money to help campaigns with independent expenditures. And let's see the effect that has had on campaigns. So as a result of the Citizens United case, we have a bunch of super PACs forming, and these super PACs can help a specific candidate, or they can be aimed at a specific party. If you see the names here, there's like Senate Leadership Fund, there's Senate Majority PAC, there's House Majority PAC. There are liberal and conservative super PACs. We see that like Clinton had the most expensive super PAC. Bush, this is in 2016, so this is Jeb Bush, had the second most expensive super PAC. So it doesn't necessarily mean that candidates will be successful, but we're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by these super PACs here. We see that they're both liberal or conservative. They may be related to, down there you see Women Vote. So could be a super PAC that just supports women running for office. Could be about Congress, could be about specific presidential campaigns. But this is a ton of money being spent. In that 2016 cycle, here we see the candidates fundraising in the blue and the super PAC in orange. So you see that these campaigns still raise a whole lot of money, but the super PACs really add to that money. In some cases, the super PACs spend way more than the candidates themselves. That would be true of Jeb Bush. That would be true of Marco Rubio and Chris Christie and Carly Fiorina. There's a lot of super PAC money being spent compared to what their campaigns are able to raise on their own. You've got other candidates here. Bernie Sanders he very specifically refused to have super PAC funding. So he refused to participate in super PACs because he thinks that they are bad. So you see, he has none. Donald Trump, an example of a candidate with very few. Now, this was early in 2016. That was definitely different for his 2020 candidacy. But in 2016, as a newcomer, he didn't have a lot of super PACs like pushing for him. You see the people with big super PACs here be Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. These are established politicians with long track records of success. So super PACs want to spend their money wisely on people that they know very well, and they won't be donating a ton of money to someone unpredictable like Donald Trump or someone who refuses their help like Bernie Sanders. And here we just see how SuperPAC spending exploded after the Citizens United decision. So this is total independent expenditures. So some forms of independent expenditures existed before 2010, but 2010 took away the rules that limited them. So after 2010, we see an explosion of SuperPAC spending to crazy levels that we're at today. So some of the different types of spending here, we have our spending by our candidates. Our candidates have to follow the rules of the FEC very closely. They have to disclose every donation they get, and they have to show an account of every dollar that they spent. We have to make sure that the candidates aren't like spending money on themselves, buying things for their family and all that kind of stuff. That's illegal. So the spending by candidates is closely monitored by the FEC, and every dollar is accounted for. Advertisements directly from the candidates will say something like, I am Kurt Rakestraw and I approve this message. And that way we know that the ad comes specifically from the campaign. Ads that don't have this message are coming from independent groups. One of these forms of independent groups that's a little older and not very important anymore, but still shows up in our textbook and on tests and stuff, is what we call a 527 group. There was an early 2000s law that tried to ban soft money, and so there were bans on ads that say vote for this candidate or vote against this candidate. So they couldn't specifically say that. So these groups made advertisements about issues in the election, and those issues would help them get around specifically saying vote for or vote against. Those issues could be anything. In fact, in 2004, some famous 527 groups, their issue was the fact that candidate John Kerry was a liar. In 2008, 527 groups attacked Barack Obama for not having saying that his birth certificate was not real. So even those things can be issues in the elections, and they specifically attack candidates, but they didn't specifically say vote for this candidate or vote against this candidate. Now that Citizens United is the current law and there aren't limits on independent spending, there's no real reason for 527 groups to exist. Super PACs can do what they did and specifically say vote for or vote against a candidate. So the official name of a super PAC is called a 501c group. This is a part of the tax code that allows them to exist here. And basically, super PACs are considered charities. So there's protections for charities, even though these charities are engaged in political campaigning. So because of Citizens United, nonprofit groups, any nonprofit group can be a super PAC. It means any nonprofit group can spend money to put a message out about the campaign. We don't have to track the donations anymore. In fact, that's part of a protection of a charity. So the donations can be secret. There's no limit on the donations. And that means that now people who want their political donations to be anonymous can do so through 501c groups. Only half of the money has to be spent on political activities. And so if they're spending other money on whatever, like, office space, things like that, salaries even, that makes these 501c groups nonprofits instead of PACs, and that means that donating money to these things is tax-free. If I'm going to spend my money on a political campaign, if I'm going to donate directly to Joe Biden, I have to pay taxes on that money as my income. But these count as political write-offs because there's no difference between these groups and charities. So the only rule here, like we said with the super PAC, is they can't directly coordinate with the candidate, but they can spend the money however they want to help the candidate. All right, so there's some very complicated campaign finance law. So we've seen a lot of rules about how the campaigns can spend money. So now we're going to finally switch over and look at the group that is enforcing the rules for these campaigns. So we're going to talk about the Federal Election Commission and the role that they play in elections.